Hi, and welcome to this month's episode of Silly Sapiens. I'm your host, Chaz, and on this episode of Silly Sapiens, we're going to be talking about gay pride. Sit back, grab a drink, and let's go for a ride. Hi, welcome back. We're so glad to have you. If you didn't catch our first episode, don't worry, it doesn't matter. You can always go back and watch it on YouTube. Just type in Silly Sapiens and you'll find our channel. It's not important if you didn't see it right now. It has nothing to do with this episode except for the fact that our themes carry through. In that episode, we talked about e pluribus unum, which means out of many one. And our show's name ultimately is Silly Sapiens. So what our show does is we talk about Homo sapiens, and we talk about e pluribus unum, out of many one. Essentially, Homo sapiens, all of us, we come from vast, large, different cultures, beliefs, parts of the world, etc. But at the end of the day, we're all one human species. And I say silly sapiens because it's kind of funny when you start studying some of our different beliefs or cultures or societies, how we take them so seriously when at the end of the day, we thought them up, we came up with them, and in a lot of cases, it's not worth people dying over, which has happened throughout so much of our history. And what this show does is it takes totally different topics, everything from maybe religion to what we're talking about today, gay pride, to e pluribus unum, the motto, the de facto motto of the United States, and we kind of go through the history, and then we kind of discuss how it affects to today and how it has contributed to the whole history of Homo sapiens. So today we're talking about gay pride because it's currently, when I'm filming this, the month of June, and that's when cities and states across the country and the world celebrate gay pride. And it all started right here in New York City at the Stonewall Inn. If you're not familiar with it at all, you maybe never walked through the West Village, I'm not sure, but it's pretty well known, and last year it made a lot of news because it was finally made a national monument. So let's dive into this. Stonewall Inn, it's predated by the 1950s and 60s, which was not a great time in the United States to be a gay person, and there were small activist groups that had started and would go into town centers, and mainly in Philadelphia, and try to make their point be heard, try to make the public know we are people, we are here, we're not going anywhere. So now you fast forward to Saturday, June 28th, 1969, when at a point in time, if you were a gay person, lesbian person, queer person of any sort, and you went to your gay bar, which couldn't even be a gay bar at the time, at any point in time, even in a city like New York City, the cops could come in, raid the place, arrest you, etc. Not good. So at Stonewall, that happened, and what the next result that happened was something that hadn't really happened before to this extent. And everybody in the bar stood up and said, no more, enough is enough, we're not going to take it. And the riots began that Saturday morning. Well, to fast forward, they wanted to remember that day and have that occurrence each day because it was a big deal. It was at some point in time, any repressed group finally says enough is enough, we're not going to take it anymore, we're standing up, we're fighting for our rights, and look, this is we have to learn to live together, and this is exactly what they did. So Craig Rodwell and his partner Fred Sargent actually proposed the first Pride March to be held in New York City by the way of a resolution at the Eastern Regional Conference of Homophile Organizations that met in Philadelphia. So you remember earlier I said that these other small activist groups had arisen. There was all of these groups would come together in Philadelphia so that they could try to be a little more organized, and that's where it was suggested. What they were saying at that time is, look, we have to make people know we're here, we're not going anywhere, and we have rights too. At the end of the day, we're human, and we have to start taking the steps to be treated like that as a whole around the country. Every single person in this community is going to have to stand up, and we're going to do it in a way of remembering all of those people that fought for it, and we're the first to say, no, enough is enough. So the very next year, they actually do it on the Sunday, and it got moved to Sunday because they thought that it would have a higher attendance. And it was a big deal because they, in fact, here today, if you were to have a parade through the city, you have to get permits way in advance and go through a lot of chains. They actually didn't get their permits for the parade that was marching from Christopher Street all the way up to Central Park until 2 hours before the parade was to start, in fear that there would be a lot of backlash from it and, protesters or violence, etc., the police, whatever it may have been. So they do it, they come together, there's tons of excitement, and they make it all the way to Central Park quicker than they thought they would, mainly because of the excitement and also a little bit because of the fear. And from that day on, we continue to do it all the way to this day. And when I'm actually filming this portion, it is going to be this weekend coming up, which is pretty phenomenal to think that, this small spark started this movement around the country and then around the world. And the whole point that it grew into was trying to show people that what once was stigmatized, I'm only human, stigmatized, is now we're turning it into saying this word pride to try to show that, no, this is who we are, and we're proud of who we are. Just as you should be proud of who you were born to be, we're going to do it too, and we're here, and we have to bring awareness to we're here because it's just not going to go away, no matter how much everybody wants it to in that country at that point in time, or even today. You're stuck with us, and we're going to celebrate it. We're going to come together, all of these vast different people that are in this community, come together, have a day, or what's now becomes a week or a month of celebration, and try to show the community that's watching, we're loving, we're human, we're people, we're no different than you. So next I'm going to give you my personal story. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it brings you a glimpse into what it's kind of like to be gay, at least one person. I mean, not all of our experiences are the same, and I can't speak on behalf of every single LGBTQ person out there. I can only tell you my story. But I do know that we all share little pieces of the same thing, and hopefully this gives you that glimpse. Hi, welcome to Chaz's Soapbox. So this month is Pride Month, it's month of June. Hopefully this airs in the month of June, and I don't know the exact air date when I'm filming right now, but yesterday was actually the 1-year anniversary of the Orlando massacre in the Poles nightclub. So for this episode, I thought my soapbox should be about pride and about gay people in general. Since I happen to be part of that community, I thought, what better than to share my story with each and every one of you, and maybe it might help somebody else that's out there. So I grew up in a really, really small Texas town where to be gay was pretty obscene and unheard of. I grew up in a family that was incredibly East Texas conservative. They tried to shield me from anything that had to have to do with homosexuality. And of course, this was back in the early 90s as well, and late 80s. So it wasn't like there was too much out there for me to get exposure to begin with. But what parents like that don't understand is that if your child is part of the LGBT community, it's gonna come out. Whether they're absorbing it in that atmosphere or not, when they get older and they're able to really learn who they are, it's inevitable. And so that's kind of what this soap is going to be talking about, is living your truth and the struggles that come with that. So my personal struggles with it were one, didn't know what I was because of the exposure. That is where the exposure part comes from. You grow up and you have this part of you that knows that you're not living your true self. Something feels off and it makes you feel isolated and disconnected from everybody around you because you have this secret, and you really don't even know what the secret is in the beginning. You just know that there's something different about you. And I remember from an early child of going to, whether it be gyms or wherever there may be a public locker room, I'm in the locker room and I remember having weird feelings towards the guys undressing around me. But if there was a girl undressing or something, that never really piqued my interest, or I never got those weird feelings. As a kid, you don't know what those weird feelings are. And that kind of progressed as I got older and older. But growing up in the area I had and the social norms around me, what society told me was, this is what you do. You get a girl, you get married, you have kids. Again, small town Texas. I know we're airing in Brooklyn, but my early childhood did not take place in Brooklyn. So I tried those things and they never set right, and they never allowed me, when I was in school, middle school, high school, whatever it was, I think to ever really truly be myself. Even though I didn't know this or understand that was the reason why I was so awkward or socially awkward or whatever it may have been, that was kind of always this underlining surface I had. So the older I got, and once I got more into high school, I did end up falling in love with a guy. It took me a long time to kind of realize what was happening to myself and that it was love. And I was so fortunate that I had some really close friends that I was able to confide in. And even at that time, I phrased it as, well, maybe I'm just curious. I don't really know what's going on. And I was also had my own personal convictions of being super Christian at the time. And I use the word super Christian because I really was. I was trying to live in what I believed from what I had been taught in a Southern Baptist church of what a good Christian was. And of course, for a lot of Southern Baptist church, homosexuality is not high up on that list. There are billions of churches across America now that openly accept that with wide arms, and I think are a leading example for other churches around the country. But the one in particular that I went to was not. So this obviously was an own internal battle that I was struggling with. I remember praying it, pray the gay away, every night I was just begging, like, why me? Why do I have this? Why do I have to be different? And, it's funny even sitting here now and thinking about then to now of how far we've come, where we have gay couples and television shows like Modern Family or, on big ABC television shows. Back then, with an exception of Ellen and Rosie, I'm sure, eventually Queer as Folk came on Showtime and stuff like that, but it was really hard to have access to that, and the internet was not nowhere near what it is today, so there wasn't like that aspect of media that you got access to it at all. So trying to figure out who you are is really hard in those small concubines. I have no idea if I just used that word correctly, it just came out. But the thing that happened, so I told my friends in high school, they were really accepting. I moved on to college not way far away, but like 5 hours away into San Antonio, and I was going to college and I was still struggling with a lot of issues that my biological parents had bestowed upon me as far as no confidence and a lot of really bad things, but that's a story for another time. And so I decided I needed to go to counseling. There was something I needed to do. I needed to improve myself. I knew that the thoughts and all of these things going inside of my brain weren't normal. And throughout my high school journey, because of this internal battle and because of other things that were going on at home, there were really, really low points in my life that I had reached that, thankfully, for other people extending a hand to me and pulling me out of those, I'm here today. But I think in some of those moments, if they weren't there, I can't say for sure if I would be or not. So I'm forever grateful for those people. But by the time I got to college and I didn't really have all those people around, I knew I have to do something. I have to talk to somebody about this. So they give you, the college I went to, so many free counseling sessions, and I went to it. I remember sitting in the lounge and they had all of these brochures on the wall, and some of it was like PDA for gay people or something like that, and I can like see the brochure in my head still to this day, but I can't remember what the exact wording on it was. And I remember like glancing at it and trying to like glance back really quick because I didn't want anybody in the room to even see me looking at that. I wanted no association. I didn't want anybody to think the paranoia had reached that much because I was hiding something to the whole world. So any little thing that I thought might tip me off, I tried to avoid at all costs. So backtracking, I kind of got ahead. I was in college. I'm going to see the counselor. I go into the counselor, I guess because I don't know her. It's incredibly easy to open up to her, or she made me not feel judged. I don't know. And she accepted it all so normal. And it wasn't just talking about my gay feelings I was having. And there was a lot of other stuff that I was talking about as well that happened in my childhood. And she was just so great about it, and what she did more than anything was change my perspective. So my whole life, the only perspective I had been given was just this one, very narrow, this is the confines you live your life in. And she was able, by asking questions, tough questions that people had never asked me before, that made me look inside myself or look at the situation I was in from totally different perspectives, completely changed my world. I mean, I went from here to here. And each session, it got bigger and bigger, and it allowed me to see the circumstance from such a wide view that it didn't seem, I don't want to say so bad, but it didn't seem like it was the end of the world, I guess is the best. I went from just saying how I was at an incredibly low point that I thought I'm never going to make it out of it, to a point or I couldn't look at a brochure on the wall because I was so afraid. Through her asking these questions got me to look at, okay, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I'm not burning in hell for the rest of my life, or going to be miserable, or depression, whatever it was at that time. So through these sessions and through a new core of close friends I developed in San Antonio, it eventually came to fruition that I just walked into work one day in school and said, "Hey, look, I'm gay." Everybody kind of just looked up and looked at me and kind of giggled and laughed. And I'm sure some of them were like, "Yeah, we know." And some of them had some genuine surprise. But it was from there in my personal life that it was it. That was the moment. From then on, I was open about it. I didn't necessarily keep walking into every single room saying, "Hey, I'm gay." But if people asked, I was honest about it. Now, with my family, it was a little bit different because, as I said, I was a very conservative family. And by this time, I had completely stopped speaking to my biological parents for an array of reasons. But I was still in contact with my grandparents. And the thought of ever coming out to them, scared me to my core, because none of us want to be rejected. At the end of the day, we all want to be loved and accepted. And I think the thought of losing these people is excruciating. So you think, do I just keep lying? Do I just go about? What are they going to know? I don't live by them. I see them every now and then, talk on the phone. I create a lie. But for me personally, the lie just kept eating away. Every single phone call I would have, and it was, "Why don't you have a girlfriend? Why don't you have a girlfriend? Why don't you, this and that?" I couldn't do it, to the point where I finally just snapped and said, "Look, I'm gay." It came out. And that was to one grandparent, and she took it as okay as her Catholic roots could allow her to at that time. And that was definitely an evolution, but she definitely struggled and fought to understand the best that her mind could allow her to. And over the years, she has come tremendously far. The other grandmother, on the other hand, partially I kind of went about it the wrong way, which I thought maybe having her husband, my step-grandfather, tell her, because he had a gay daughter, maybe that was the best option. He would know how, coming from being a parent of a gay child to being able to talk to her about it. So through his daughter, I asked him to do that, and he did. And she did not take it very well at all. And it was years, actually, before I even heard from her or spoke to her. After that day, there was just silence for years. And then I was searching through old emails, and I found out she had actually emailed this old email account And I start reading the email, and it was just this scathing email to myself of, we used to be so proud of you, and now, we're just ashamed of you, and, God hates you, and yada, 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 yada. When I responded to her email with my rebuttal and some of the points that she tried to bring up about the Bible or any of this stuff, at that point in time, I had been well versed. I'd done my research. I was confident in who I was. I knew what I was. I gave her this rebuttal and my side of the story, and in it, at that point in time, we were seeing in the news a lot about teen suicide, and oftentimes they ended up being transgender or gay or bi or lesbian. And I put that in my email that, I don't believe any child should get to that point in their lives where they feel that the whole world hates them so much that they have to end their life because that's the only way out. And that this rhetoric she was sending to me, and that's what does it. That's in her response. I'm paraphrasing because I can't quite remember all of it, but it basically was a sense of, I don't care. I don't care these kids are killing themselves. I'm sick of having it in my face. There was just no empathy. There was nothing. And it was in that moment I saw she's never going to be able to see herself from a different perspective. She's never going to be able to put herself into those other kids' shoes. And, I tried and we emailed it back, and finally it was kind of like, look, I'll always love you. If you ever find that love for me, I'll be here. But until then, it's not healthy for us to have each other in our life and just rip each other down. And, I wish you all the best in the world, and move on. And I know that is incredibly difficult for many people, and that's the scariest and worst case solution, or worst case scenario that can happen. But there becomes this point in your life where you're confident in who you are, you know who you are, and the beauty of conversation, the beauty of us being able to talk to one another is that I can talk to you, I can tell you who I am, I can tell you what my personal feelings are, and you can listen. And, if we're close, if we're friends, if we're family or whatever, ideally, given my character that you know of me in the past, you take that information and you weigh it accordingly. And if I've had good character that you've been exposed to, ideally you would take that information with love, from a loving perspective, and say, I may not understand this, I may not get it, it may go against everything I believe, but I love you, you're able to communicate this to me, therefore, I accept you in that way. Some people can't, and I have a great amount of respect for people who do, for straight people who are out there being allies for gay people, or who have always stood up for gay rights, politicians that stood up for gay rights when it wasn't the thing to do, when you became persecuted for it. I have a tremendous amount of respect for them, because even as a gay person, there's times that I probably don't stand up enough for my cause, or I don't speak out enough. When we're talking about people's lives on the lines, you can never speak out enough. You can never share your story enough in hopes that you reach them, and letting them know that it will be okay. You can get through this. Society is speeding forward on this issue. Unfortunately, yes, still to this day, according to PolitiFact, hate crimes for the LGBT community is still at the all-time, it still beats any other minority group. The animal trainer inside of me knows about extinction burst, and what happens is, we legalize gay marriage. We are much more open about it. With Facebook right now, you can do a pride flag. I remember looking from my apartment last year, 2 years ago, the Empire State Building and the Freedom Tower changed their tops to rainbow. The little kid in small town Texas never would have dreamed of a day that was a thing. I remember watching on the news, watching cops go into people's houses and raid them for sodomy crimes. How far we have come is tremendous, and I know we will go tremendously further together, because humans at the end of the day know that if we all stick together, no matter what our differences are, that is where our strength lies. That is how humanity moves forward. That is how we accomplish all of the tasks at hand. If we sit and we pick each other apart because of beliefs that we have, and we ignore facts, or we ignore the person sitting in front of us, That's where we get distracted. All of these other issues that are at hand that unfortunately we have to solve because our civilization depends on it. The strength of our civilization, the prosperity of our civilization, the future of it all depends on us coming together and tackling these issues head on. But if we continue to spread hate about one another and tear each other down and not listen to one another or open ourselves up to another human being, I don't know how humans can succeed. It doesn't make sense because there's just too many of us that all have amazing ideas and all have the ability to come together and shape our future and make a difference, because it's not going to be just all one group of people that's going to make the difference. It's every single one. It's every group. And if we can't make that happen, it's hard to have an optimistic view of the future. But in my short lifetime, I've seen that, no, we can. And I think that, to my earlier point about the extinction burst, is yes, when people who may have bigoted views or are still stuck in their small perspective, when they are being bombarded by all of this, it only unfortunately makes them mad, more angry, more mad, and potentially could do more harm, which is why we see an intake in these hate crimes. But the thing about extinction bursts is they do eventually go away. It's just something that takes time. And I think that where society is heading and where we are going is showing that history is, I guess I shouldn't say history, but the future is on our side. People are coming along, and it's a beautiful thing. As I started this conversation, or this part of my soapbox speech, I have a ton of respect for people who are on that complete straight end of the spectrum and say, I accept you for who you are, because that is hard. That is incredibly, incredibly difficult, because you are born into your life and this is how you see the world in this one way, but you are having to completely step outside of that and see it from a totally different perspective from your own and accept it and just believe that, yeah, that's what they're saying is true. And that is beautiful. That shows the evolution of a person within their life, of what they can do and what they can achieve and how they truly can show compassion. All of these religious leaders spoke about compassion, and that, at the end of the day, is the epitome of compassion. And a lot of times we think compassion is just this easy thing. It's, oh, I love you, you love me, the Barney song, let's all be friends. But that's not the reality of it. Compassion takes work. It is a practice. It is something that, if you don't practice it, it doesn't come easy. You seeing the bum on the street or a person who is nothing like you, you're not going to be able to see yourself in those shoes without any practice, unless you were just an amazing, innate human being that is able to do that without any practice. But I think for most of human society, because we all have the good and the bad in us, it is a practice that we have to work on. And obviously, these individuals do. Well, with love, that's been my soapbox from Chaz. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.